We're checking in on the Buffalo Bills' biggest position battles today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Thanks for joining me and making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder, we are free and available to you on all platforms, including YouTube. Well, folks, the Bills are well into preseason. Training camp is behind us. Players have been cut. The Bills announced that they cut cornerback Tim Harris and linebacker Markel Lee, in addition to the players we discussed yesterday on the podcast. And it's all about sorting out this roster. It's all about figuring out who the 53 guys are going to be when the Bills take on the Los Angeles Rams to start the season, right? To kick off the entire NFL season. And this is all about earning jobs for these players. Their chance to be a starter or a key reserve, or the difference in making the roster and not making the roster. And with a big chunk of the preseason and training camp, the whole build up to the regular season behind us, I think it's fair for us to assess some of the biggest position battles and talk about who the leading player is. And so I've went through and identified the 7 most intriguing position battles, in my opinion. I want to talk about them and then tell you who I think the leader is predictively at this point in time based on the information we've acquired to this point. So let's get into it. We'll start with CB2. And in this conversation, I want to assume that Dane Jackson is CB1 and Tre'Davious White is starting the year on the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list. Now, the reason that I think Dane Jackson is CB1 is because the Bills didn't play him against the Colts in the preseason opener. They held him out like he was any other starter. Pretty clear sign that he's got one of the starting jobs locked up. Now, the other spot is wide open. The 2 leading candidates, first-round pick, rookie Cair Elam, 6th-round pick, corner out of Villanova, Christian Benford. We have a legitimate battle for this role. Who's going to start opposite of Dane Jackson in week 1, assuming Tre'Davious White is not available? So let's give you the case for each player, and then I'll tell you who I think is in the lead. We'll start with Cair Elam. The case there is quite easy. He's the Bills' first-round pick. He's got the superior physical profile in terms of size and athleticism. He's battle-tested coming from Florida, playing in the SEC, going up against top competition. The Bills didn't pick him in the first round for him not to be an impact player for this team. Now, when does that happen? That remains to be seen. And just because Cair Elam isn't a week 1 starter, it doesn't mean that he won't be a long-term impact starter. And one thing that I've said repeatedly on this podcast is that under Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, first-round picks have started, and they've basically started their entire rookie season. Tre'Davious White, Josh Allen, Tremaine Edmonds, Ed Oliver, Greg Rousseau. They were pretty much immediate starters. Now, I wonder if we lived in a world where Tre'Davious White was healthy, if it would be Trey White and Dane Jackson as your starters in week 1, but I don't know that we live in that world right now. So there's a lot of great momentum for Cair Elam, and he played really well against the Colts. I'm very satisfied with his performance in that game. Now, Christian Benford is not, he don't know that he's a 6th-round pick and is not supposed to start this year. Nobody's told him that. And you love that about him. You love that he's coming from a small school that's not known for football. When you guys think Villanova, you think basketball, right? not football. Well, Christian Benford got drafted by the Bills, and he's making noise, earning those first-team reps, continues to gain first-team reps, and started opposite of Cair Elam in week 1 of the preseason against the Colts, and he played really well. I think it's probably fair to say that even though they both played well, the better corner in that game was probably Christian Benford. I thought he was a little bit more consistent in coverage. Probably a tight margin, but I think it's pretty impressive how he showed up in that football game and the way this team has talked about him. So he's right there. He's earned those reps. He's done enough as a 6th-round pick to get first-team reps and in practice over Cair Elam at times. So he's absolutely making a case for himself here. One thing that I want to bring up that is pretty interesting in this conversation that I'm not sure I've heard discussed to this point. Against the Colts in that game, Cair Elam was the left cornerback. Christian Benford was the right cornerback. Now that's significant. Let me tell you why. Remember when Trey White went down last year? The left cornerback was Dane Jackson. The right cornerback was Levi Wallace. So if Dane Jackson is locked in as the left cornerback starter and Christian Benford's getting the first-team reps at right cornerback, that could be somewhat of an indicator. I hope that makes sense to you, because they're playing them pretty much exclusively on either side of the formation. And so if Cair Elam is going to start opposite of Dane Jackson in week 1, I'd like to see him start getting those reps on the right side, because that's where he's going to play. And right now, that's where Christian Benford is. So there's plenty of reasons to believe that this can go either way. But I do believe at this point, the leader in the clubhouse is going to be Cair Elam as the first-round pick with the superior physical gifts and obviously just what he was drafted to be. But I think it might be a little tighter than a lot of people might want to admit. Let's move on to the next one. Punter. You know what? Look, it's kind of been frustrating talking punters the last, I guess, several years. But I'll talk about punters all day long if it means we don't have to talk about quarterback, right? Like, this has been a frustrating issue for the Bills, not being able to land or, knock down this punter's position, but sure beats the hell out of talking about if you got a quarterback or not. So we've got Matariza versus Matt Hawk. What's the case for each one? Well, it's pretty straightforward on this one. The case for Matt Hawk is the case for Matt Hawk is that he's an experienced NFL punter that is an outstanding holder, and he's got a long history of punting. I'm not saying he's ever been a good punter, but he's done it. And he's an experienced player. For Matariza, the case is that he's a draft pick with unbelievable talent, right? He's got to continue evolving and gaining enough repetition so that it's second nature in games and you don't worry about inconsistency, but he's the much higher upside option. Now, I do want to talk a little bit more about Matt Arizer right now, and I want you to allow me to say some things here without you getting mad at me. Just open your mind for just a second. I'm a big Matariza fan. I got the Punt God shirt. I want him to win this job. I'm excited about him. He's got an unbelievable ceiling, right? I'm still swooning over that 82-yard punt with a 62-yard net. But let's have a little bit of a nuanced conversation about what we've learned about Matt Ariza so far. What have we learned? What new information have we learned about Matt Ariza from that Colts game? Well, I'd say, first of all, he got a chance to hold on a couple of field goals, including the game-winning field goal, and he looked fine. He did it well. We've seen Tyler Bass comment on Instagram that it was a great hold. That's awesome, right? That was one of the big question marks with Matt Ariza. So that was a great box to check. That is great new information that we've learned. I love that he launched that punt. That was a phenomenal punt that you would take every single time. But we knew that Matariza had a big leg. We knew that. That's not new information. He had 18 punts last year in college of 60 or more yards and 2 that were 80 or more yards. We knew he could launch the ball. Now, it's very meaningful that he was able to show up and be who he's supposed to be in a game, his first NFL game. You should care a lot about that. But we knew Matariza could kick the ball to the moon. The issue, and look, like I said, open your mind here. The concern about Matariza still remains about hang time. He kicked the ball 82 yards, but the hang time was only 4.22 seconds. Now, like I've said a million times, you take the 62-yard net every single time in the history of football, you'll take a 62-yard net punt. No questions asked, ever. The result was awesome. But teams can adjust to that. It's very simple. You put your returner deeper. Matariza kicks the ball to the moon, put your returner deeper. And now you have a situation where Matariza is out kicking the coverage without enough hang time. That is not good. That is going to lead to explosive returns against the Bills. So, again, I love the punt. I love the result. But let's be honest about what's going on here. It's a great result. But the NFL is just going to move the punt returner back. He's going to catch the ball. And with bad hang time, it's going to set up an explosive return. It's a punt returner's dream. A far punt that's out-kicking the coverage that doesn't have enough hang time. 82-yard punt, 4.22 seconds of hang time is very poor. So you see the concern there? Does that make sense to you? I hope it does. Again, I'm not trying to toss a wet blanket over the Matariza stuff. I'm a big fan, but let's have a nuanced football conversation about what all this means. So what do we learn about Matariza and hang time and control from the Colts game? Nothing. Nothing at all. Remember, this guy, 31% of his pooch punt attempts last year in college were touchbacks. That's a very poor percentage. Now, the encouraging thing is what I can tell you with my own eyes. And I watched Matariza on Wednesday last week, Thursday last week, and I was on the field pregame, and I was watching Matariza the whole time. I've seen him do a really good job controlling the football. But we haven't yet seen it in games. And so I wanted to add a little bit of nuance here to this Matariza conversation because we're all hyped up about that punt, but I still think there's more that we need to learn. And certainly it's a one-game sample size. It's literally a one punt sample size and 2 field goals. So I think the leader in the clubhouse here, the guy, predictably, I think Matariza is going to win this job. I really, really do. But I don't want to sit here and ignore the entire scope of what deserves to be discussed when we consider Matariza. I think he's got the talent to become an elite NFL punter. I want it to happen. I hope it happens. But these are the things we should be talking about if we're going to be willing to have good conversations about projecting Matariza to being this team's punter right away. I need to tell you guys about our partner, Athletic Greens. I started taking Athletic Greens because I wanted to see what the hype was about. So what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all the things. I take it to jumpstart my day, and it gives me more energy and balances my diet in a very simple way. Tons of people take some kind of multivitamin, and it's important to choose one with high-quality ingredients that your body will actually absorb. AG1 is a small micro habit with big benefits. It's one thing you can do every single day to take great care of yourself. Athletic Greens is critical for my daily routine. It helps promote better sleep, quality, and recovery, and it supports mental clarity and alertness. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a 1-year supply, a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NFL network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NFL network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. All right, let's move on from punters. The next three position groups that I want to talk about are offensive positions, and two of them are receiver. The first one I want to discuss is slot receiver. Jameson Crowder versus Isaiah Mckenzie. So we'll talk about the case for each. I'll give you the leader in the clubhouse. Probably not a whole lot of mystery here. The case for Isaiah Mckenzie is that he's the longest tenured receiver that Josh Allen has. He's been extremely flashy in small sample sizes, and he's dominated training camp to this point. Also, the Bills told us a lot about the way they feel about Isaiah Mckenzie when they decided to not play him at all against the Colts. Who did play against the Colts? Jameson Crowder. What did he do in the game? Let a ball bounce off his hands that was intercepted. Now, like I said on the recap podcast after the Colts game, we have a large sample size of Jameson Crowder playing NFL football where he doesn't have issues catching the ball. But we also haven't seen Jameson Crowder play for the Bills and be in this offense and work with Josh Allen. There's a lot of momentum for Isaiah Mckenzie. It feels like he's done everything he possibly can from a receiver perspective to wait his time, earn his opportunity, and then prosper. That's what we're all hoping for. So now Crowder is certainly the more experienced player, a guy that has a much better resume. All of that's going to side with Crowder, but the upside play here is Mckenzie. And when you think about just the culture components, this is everything that Sean McDermott wants, right? He wants these guys that he brought him in 2018 after he was cut by the Broncos, his original team, and just kept on earning it over and over and over again and sticking around. And now he's here having his opportunity to flourish. That's exactly what he wants to see happen with personnel. Like that's the whole develop your players, retain them, and allow them to earn opportunities. McKenzie's done that. So I think it's pretty clear what the case is for each, but I think pretty firmly the leader in the clubhouse is Isaiah Mckenzie. And then the question becomes, well, can you roster Jameson Crowder if he's your backup slot receiver that doesn't help you on special teams? I don't know about that. It could be a surprise cut. The next position group that I want to talk about, or the position battle, is wide receiver 6. Jake Kumaro versus Isaiah Hodgins. Let's live in a world where it's Diggs, Davis, McKenzie, Shakir as your top 4 guys, and then you kind of have one spot left, or you have 2 spots left for Tavon Austin, Jameson Crowder, Jake Kumaro, Isaiah Hodgins. But specifically, it's Jake Kumaro versus Isaiah Hodgins for one spot, and we'll call it wide receiver 6. So we'll look at the case for each, and then I'll give you who I think the leader in the clubhouse is. The case for Jake Kumaro is that he's an experienced NFL player that can fill a very meaningful role for you on special teams while also giving you a dynamic blocking receiver and a size component for the position with a lot of experience in the NFL. Not that he's made a lot of plays, but he's been on a lot of, he's been on a roster for a while. He's seen the game. He knows what to expect from a week-to-week basis in the league. And obviously, we've heard Sean McDermott talk about Jake Kumaro as a glue guy for the team and a big part of what the Buffalo Bills are. The case for Isaiah Hodgins is that there's probably a bit more, I wouldn't say probably, there is more receiving upside there. What he's shown so far as a route runner with his release package, the way that he's catching the football, that's always been a great trait for Isaiah Hodgins. You go back and watch this guy at Oregon State, he catches everything, literally. Big-time hands. Now, he's got a different body composition. He's kind of a taller, leaner, more angular frame as opposed to Jake Kumaro, who has a bit more thickness throughout, which translates better to a blocking role, to a special teams role. So do you want to go with the younger player with more receiving upside that has a lot to prove on special teams? Or do you want to go with the older player that doesn't give you much value as a receiver, but you know what you're getting on teams? It's kind of a challenging situation. to me, I can really be, if I had to make the call, I think I could be talked into either selection. But I want to give you my predictive choice based on, me studying this team for years and trying to sort this out. And this could be a situation where they could both make it. You cut Crowder and you keep both these guys. Like, that's definitely a possibility. And I would argue that there's more versatility with either Kumaro and Hodgins as opposed to just what Crowder gives you. Because I think there's more special teams upside. And then you could cut Crowder and you still have a Tanner Gentry sitting on your practice squad. You're still going to have Khalil Shakir on your roster. You still feel plenty good about what you have from a depth perspective in the slot. And so maybe that's the path. Maybe there is a path for both of them. But for the sake of this conversation, I want to live in a world where it's either or. Predictively, I think the Bills will opt to stick with the veteran player that they're comfortable with, that they've spoken favorably about. I think that's where they would go. But at worst case scenario, assuming Isaiah Hodgins doesn't get picked up or something like that, if the Bills had to expose him to waivers, you'd love to keep him on the practice squad. So maybe there's a world where they both make it, but if there isn't right now, don't get mad at me. I know that sometimes I go against the grain based on what fans will want, but I'm trying to be predictive. And of course, I'm willing to admit that I might not get this correct. Predictively right now, I'd say it's Jake Kumaro. Let's go to the next position battle, which I think is really interesting. Tight end 2 and tight end 3. I think the Bills are going to roster 3 tight ends. Dawson Knox is one of them. And then you have Tommy Sweeney versus O.J. Howard versus Quentin Morris. This is compelling. Now, we unpacked yesterday on the podcast that O.J. Howard's contract certainly looks like a contract of a player that's going to make the team. I mean, the Bills are they're on the hook for basically all of his salary, all like 3.12 of $3.5 million. They're on the hook for. There's no benefit from a salary cap perspective to cut O.J. Howard. Now, they could trade him. That would be helpful. That would get that done. And maybe there's a path for that to happen. But in terms of him just being cut, that's challenging. Now, the case for O.J. Howard is that you hope that the light bulb comes on and he can help you in the passing game. But let's be honest. I mean, one thing that I said, even go back to the very first time I talked about O.J. Howard when the Bills signed him. I said, this guy can block. And so, yeah, maybe he's sluggish as a receiver, and you wish that he was a little bit more dynamic and it doesn't quite look like the specimen we saw at Alabama after all the injuries. I still think he's going to be a really good blocker. And as a tight end, too, I mean, what are you realistically talking about? 15 targets maybe for the season? Like maybe 15 targets. The primary function is going to be to block. And so while I think there's a level of disappointment for what O.J. Howard isn't as a receiver, is that really his primary function as a tight end too? I think we need to understand that. That's the case there, right? So I always say this, don't major in minoring. I know this sounds silly, but the major thing with the tight end too is not their ability to catch the football. We're talking about 15 or 20 targets maybe on the season. They're going to block hundreds of snaps. Don't major in minoring. O.J. Howard's a good blocker. So if you're trying to reconcile this and figure out why he should make the team, understand that dynamic. Tommy Sweeney, what's the case for him? Well, I mean, he's been around. Sounds like the team loves him in terms of what he means to the locker room, leadership, bonds well with the guys. He's a dude. Seems to have some flashy moments from time to time, but look, a lot of disappointment there as well. I've went back and watched a lot of the 2021 season. Tommy Sweeney, for a limited amount of time that he was on the field, there was a lot of blunders, whether it was drops, multiple drops, false starts, there's issues there. And obviously kind of an underwhelming talent in terms of size and athleticism and those types of things. And then there's Quentin Morris, who's not like either Sweeney or Howard. You're not going to get much of him as a blocker, maybe as an insert blocker, but he's probably the most dynamic receiving talent of the three. And so let's not thumb our nose at the possibility of Quentin Morris making his football team. You saw some of that athleticism against the Colts with that over-the-shoulder catch. So I think there's a reasonable case for all three of these guys. I think two of them make the team. I think O.J. Howard's going to make this team based on his contract and based on the blocking stuff that I talked about. So then it comes down to Tommy Sweeney versus Quentin Morris for the tight end 3 job. The good news is I don't think you're going to have issues getting either of them back on the practice squad. They're going to clear waivers. They're going to be back on the practice squad. That is, of course, unless the New York Giants are going to pluck every player the Bills cut, and they already have with Elijah Griffin. Predictably, I'll say Tommy Sweeney because he's more experienced and he's a draft pick, but I would not sleep. I would not sleep on Quentin Morris really making a threat there. It's almost the start of the NFL season. I love this time of year. And if you're into sports betting or fantasy, you need a competitive edge to win. That's why I highly recommend the Elias Game Plan app. It's the ultimate sports betting and fantasy companion for the NFL, NBA, and MLB. Elias Game Plan is the only sports app from the most trusted name in sports stats, the Elias Sports Bureau, who is the official statisticians of U.S. pro sports leagues, including the NFL. Their app lets you access team and player stats, head-to-head team comparisons, and Elias insights from the Elias Sports Bureau's research team. This app really is your one-stop source for player news and league-validated player stats and team records, expert game analysis for betting, building your fantasy team, and impressing your friends. It's perfect for the preseason. You get player previews to help you draft a winning fantasy team and team previews so you know what to expect as the regular season kicks off. Take my advice. Download the Elias Game Plan app today, and with new features available all the time, take your game to the next level. The NFL season is right around the corner, so don't wait. Find Elias Game Plan in the App Store or Play Store today. Folks, if you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, then what are you doing? I talk about them all the time because they're delicious. I literally eat these things. I probably have a wrapper right here. Maybe I threw it out. Listen, I eat these things every single day. I'm not lying to you. They're phenomenal. They taste so good. They're healthy. They're covered in 100% real chocolate. And like, it doesn't make sense that they taste so good and they're so healthy for you. I mean, they just launched this cookie dough chunk Puffs bar. It's phenomenal. It's only 160 calories and 15 grams of protein. And you feel good about eating them because they taste good and they're healthy. If you want to get in on the hype, find out what I'm talking about all the time. I got a deal for you. Go to Built.com. Use our promo code LOCKED15. It'll get you 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Got a couple more to get to here. The next one is defensive end 4. Shaq Lawson versus Boogie Basham versus AJ Epinesa. I think there's a pretty clear path to all of these guys making the roster. So that's why when I say defensive end 4, one of them is going to make the roster and be an inactive player. So which two of these 3 is going to dress on Sundays alongside Von Miller and Gregory Rousseau? Well, the case for Shaq Lawson is that he's the most, well, I wouldn't say he's the most, he's the most experienced NFL player of the group, and he has experience in the scheme. And you've liked what he's given you in the past, right? I mean, maybe he's not the first-round caliber player that the Bills drafted him, but he's certainly a rotation-worthy player that gives you good ability against the run. Obviously, Boogie Basham, we don't talk about this enough. Like, he played a lot better at the end of last season, played his best football late. He got better last season as it went on. And he made, obviously, the strip sack against the Colts. You feel good about him as a guy you can reduce inside. You know, we talk about that with AJ Epinesa. It doesn't really happen. Boogie can do that for you. Hot motor, like there's some likable things here. Obviously, a recent second-round pick. The case for AJ Epinesa is that year 3, you feel like he's positioned well to play his best football. A lot of good comments from Coach Frazier about where he's at physically and mentally. He's done more than Basham so far in the NFL in terms of some of those. While infrequent, he's had some splashy plays. He showed up on occasion. Now, you need everyone to take a step. All of these guys got to take a step. But who's going to be the one that doesn't dress on Sundays? Right now, I think it might be Shaq Lawson. But we'll see. We'll see. Shaq Lawson was playing kind of late in that Colts game. Again, I'm being predictive here. The last position battle I want to get to is linebacker 3. Tyrel Dodson versus Terrell Bernard. Tyrel Dodson, the guy who's been around for a little bit now. You know, he's really has. I mean, it's like his 3rd year on the team. Terrell Bernard, a recent top 100 pick, a 3rd-round pick by the Bills. A lot of athleticism. I think he's more of a niche player, a blitzer, space player, overhang, those types of things. Tyrel Dodson probably gives you, at least he's more appealing to me as a downhill stack backer, backing up Tremaine. Like, I feel better about him than Bernard in that role. But obviously you have a lot more athleticism from Bernard. I think they both make the team. I think they both dress on Sundays. But if the Bills go 3 linebackers, who's on the field with Tremaine and Matt Milano? If the Bills have an injury to one of those 2 players and the Bills are in their 2 linebacker set, who goes in for Edmonds or Milano? I think what's challenging about this is Tyrel Dodson didn't play against the Colts. You know, he working through some, I'm sure, general soreness, as Sean McDermott likes to put it. So we're not exactly sure what's going on there, but I mean, he needs the reps. He needs the game reps. I have a hard time picking here. I really do. All the other ones I kind of had a good lean going into, you know, I map out the show. I have an outline and that type of stuff. I had a good idea of what I was going to say, and I was hoping that I would talk myself to a point in delivering the information that would give me a good indication as to who I think predictively will win this job. And I'm not getting as far as I wanted to, but I'll say this. The thing that stands out to me in my head is that Terrell Bernard is a 3rd-round pick. And I think that's really going to help him. I think it's going to put him in good position to be that 3rd linebacker on the field. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's a situation where if Matt Milano goes down, Bernard goes in, or if Tremaine Edmonds goes down, it would be Dodson. I think that would be a reasonable middle ground for us to get to, because I think they both make the roster. All right, folks, that's going to do for us here today on the podcast. Hope you enjoyed this. A little check-in on the biggest position battles on the Buffalo Bills right now. Got a lot more coming this week. Bills will play the Broncos on Saturday. We got plenty to talk about. I've got a pretty fun concept coming for you later in the week that's something we need to talk about. It'll be good. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.